Hi, this is Kirk, the bariatric carnivore. Well, what do you think about medically induced anorexia? Now, that's not to be confused with the psychological condition called anorexia nervosa. Anorexia just basically means loss of appetite. The nervosa part is actually when it becomes an emotional issue. And anorexia nervosa is a killer. It is a dangerous condition where people get this dysmorphic body image and they think that they're fat, but they're really not. And through whatever means in their mind, they start basically starving themselves to death. Well, the medical profession can create its own anorexia, which is the destruction of appetite. And there's a couple of ways of doing it. One of them is through bariatric surgery, which is what I had. And what you're doing is you're cutting out a big hunk of the stomach. But what's not interesting about bariatric surgery as far as the anorexia part is, it's not so much the restriction in the size of the stomach, but the changes in hormones. The hormonal, most of your hunger signaling hormones are stored in your stomach, and when you cut out 70% of the stomach, they found that it creates some dramatic hormonal changes. The levels of ghrelin and other hunger signaling signals go away. And I found that fascinating, that I could go sometimes a day or two without even eating and not even thinking about it because there's no signal of hunger. And that is medically induced anorexia. Another form of medically induced anorexia is what we're seeing with drugs called the GLP-1 inhibitor types, Ozempic, Wegovy, and things like that. My own personal experience with medically induced anorexia was back in the 90s with fen-phen, which is a drug combination that helped reduce appetite. And that one, there was a downside to it that they didn't discover until after it was in the general public. I mean, when the FDA approves a pharmacological agent, they do several phases of testing. Phase 3 is when they test it to see if it's creating an effect, but also not killing anybody. And if it survives to the phase 3 trial, then it goes to what they call the phase 4 trial, where they release it to the public, and then you find out, what does this thing have an effect on when you start applying it to large numbers of people? And what they found with fen-phen was once they started giving it to large numbers of people, some of them developed real serious heart valve problems. And I don't know how the FDA, what their thinking was on this one, but frankly, if you were obese, you ran serious risks of having heart problems. So having a drug that caused heart problems, it seemed like almost a trade-off. I wish they'd done a better analysis of saying, okay, look, frankly, here's the risk, general public. If you will remain fat, your chances of dying of a heart attack go up this much, but there's this much of a chance if you take the drug, and you'll probably die from a heart attack. Yeah, at least I could have made a decision based on legitimate knowledge, but no, the FDA in their presumed wisdom just removed it from the market. And as a result, I had lost a remarkable amount of weight on fen-phen. I was one of the success stories on that. And then they take away the drug, and over the next 5 years, I regained all the weight again. I kind of suspect similar things are going to be happening with Ozempic and Wegovy, because we are now in the phase 4 trial of that drug. And now people are starting to find out that one of the mechanisms that seems to be working when you take Wegovy is it slows down your guts, particularly the action in your stomach. And they found that people that were on Ozempic and Wegovy had to not eat 2 or 3 days before any type of surgery because their stomach wasn't emptying. And that creates problems. If you just do the standard, hey, don't eat within 12 hours before you have surgery, that works fine for normal people. But if you're taking those drugs, you got to do it a lot longer because it takes longer for your stomach to empty. And some people, one of the lawsuits that's now working its way through the courts is people have determined that, oh my gosh, I've taken this drug and I had stomach issues, and now I've got permanent paralysis or what seems to be permanent paralysis in the stomach and the guts. And that's creating real problems. So there'll be issues that will pop up. Now, are they bad enough to counter, how many people are going to have those type of gut issues versus how many people are going to be helped with the Wegovy? That's a different question, and one that we'll have to take a couple of years of experimentation on large numbers of people before we get a real clear answer on that one. I'm just pointing out what is popping out now. I don't cast any judgment on it. I mean, you're talking to a guy that took fen-phen and had bariatric surgery. So I'm not throwing any asparagus at anybody that's trying Ozempic as a means to lose weight. But I've got concerns about it, because what is becoming really crystal clear is too many people, when you have bariatric surgery, in order to have it for the most part, particularly if you are getting it done through an insurance company, you have to jump through 3 to 4 months of hoops to go through. You have to lose a certain amount of weight. You have to go through counseling ahead of time as to diet, exercise, post-surgery diet and exercise, and you have a really good understanding before you have bariatric surgery as to what you can eat, how you should eat, etc. And as a result, the success rate as far as losing at least 70% of your goal weight within a year and keeping it off for at least 3 to 5 years is somewhere close to 60 to 70%. It's a pretty successful weight loss method for most people. And part of that is just because of the intense work that you have to do in order to have the surgery. Now, I didn't do that. The way I had my bariatric surgery is I didn't have regular insurance. I paid for it and had the surgery done in Mexico. It cost me $4,000 out of pocket, so I was like, okay, I'll do that instead of jumping through all these hoops. And it worked well, but I did my own due diligence and I did my own study before I had the surgery. And the one thing that I really wanted to know before I permanently changed my stomach was, hey, how can you have 70% of your stomach removed and not lose weight? Because at least a third of the people that have the surgery don't lose the weight. How does that happen? And when I started doing the research, I started finding videos from people that had had bariatric surgery and failed. And they were all horribly miserable because they were eating chips and cookies and other stuff that they shouldn't have been eating. And most of them were kind of pressured to have the surgery by family and well-meaning friends, but they didn't do the homework and they weren't committed to making the lifestyle change. And when I hung around with people that had had bariatric surgery and been successful at it, all of them, without exception, had changed their diet and lifestyle, and they were committed to getting enough protein and eating a healthy diet. That's what they needed to do in order to be successful for the long run. And I know a lot of people that have had the bariatric surgery and have kept their weight off now close to 2 decades. But they're all committed to it. They are basically, kind of like me. They've stayed in touch with how to be healthy utilizing food and exercise. Look, bariatric surgery is not a magic wand that causes you to lose weight. It is a tool. And too many people look at bariatric surgery as a magic wand, and they're also looking at Ozempic as a magic wand. That if they just give themselves this $1,500 a month injection, they're going to automatically lose weight. And yes, most of the people that are taking Ozempic for at least the first 6 months do lose weight. The problem is half the weight they're losing is lean tissue, i.e. muscle and bone. The most important tissues in your body for the long run. They're losing half of their weight in fat, the other half in the stuff that they need because they're not changing their diet. See, there's a couple of theories on how you lose weight. One of them is the medical or anorexia method. Calories in, calories out. The idea that if you just simply restrict the amount of calories that are coming in, you can lose weight. The other one is the more hormonal approach, the one that I follow, which is the low carb approach. When I realized, looking at the evidence, that look, when you're trying to gain weight, what you need is more insulin. Best example of that is, look, one of the most horrible diseases out there is type 1 diabetes, where your pancreas just simply does not produce insulin, and you waste away very, very quickly because your body cannot store fat anymore. Because insulin is remarkably good at storing fat, and you will waste away if your insulin level drops to 0. But too much insulin causes fat to clump onto you in a heartbeat. And the best way, without injecting yourself with insulin, to increase your insulin levels is to increase your amount of carbohydrates. Because when you eat ultra-processed food or carbohydrates, that sends off a very strong insulin signal. That's what's going to help you gain lots of weight. If you don't want to, just restrict the carbs. And that's when I went low carb, keto, and eventually carnivore. That's what's helped keep my weight down. My insulin level, when I get my fasting insulin level checked, it runs about 1.2 or 5 or something like that. It's really low. I don't need much insulin because I don't eat many carbs, and as a result, it reduces the amount of inflammation, and it gets the blood glucose out of my system. What I need, my body creates naturally and stores in the muscles. And when I eat lots of protein, I'm maintaining my muscle mass. I had a DEXA scan, and I'm down to less than 17% body fat, and I've got remarkably dense bones, which is what you want. You want lots of muscle, not too much fat, and very strong bones as you age, because it is darn difficult as you get older to replace it. And what's going to happen, I can see it coming like a train wreck, that when people come off of drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, and they've lost a bunch of weight, but they can no longer afford the $1,500 or so a month for the drug, and they quit, they're going to start slowly regaining the weight, but it's going to be worse than when they started, because half the weight they lost was lean tissue and bone. And they're going to go back up to their normal weight again, but it's all going to be fat. And that's going to create some serious health problems for them, because as they get older, it is very difficult to gain more muscle and bone. Not saying it's impossible. It just becomes more difficult as we get older. That's just a fact of life. So, what do? Well, realize what bariatric surgery and Ozempic and Wegovy really are. They're medically induced anorexia, reduction in appetite. And if you want to go with that method, that is your choice. But I would strongly suggest you try going low carb first for at least 3 months. And I really would recommend you try just going carnivore, just sticking with beef, butter, bacon, and eggs for 3 months, just to see where, to help your body heal, get over your addiction to processed food, and to just see what you really are sensitive to. And it may surprise you what foods, when you're done with that 3-month experiment and you try to add in something, you might find out this stuff really affects you worse than you thought. You just didn't know because that was the normal. So that's my thought for the day. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a couple of messages each week. If you like this message, please hit the like and subscribe button. Join this tribe. Remember, in the fight for your health, nobody's looking after you. The medical system, big pharma, the government, the media, nobody's going to tell you how to get healthy. That's your job. You got to figure it out. Thankfully, even though you're alone in that fight, you can be alone in it together, and there's a lot of great resources out there. Hopefully this channel is one of them, and you will join us and help me get this message out to more people. I try to put out a couple of messages each week. I will talk to you again soon.